The confirmation came through on a Thursday morning in October, just after 7, while I was standing at the kitchen counter in my work boots and a flannel shirt, waiting for the coffee to finish. Wire transfer complete. $87,000 to Riverside Fillion Events, LLC. I read the number, set the phone face down next to the machine, poured myself a cup, and picked up the newspaper I'd been working through. The box scores. A piece about highway construction delays outside the city. The number didn't shake me. I had earned every dollar of it over 32 years of running a company that started with 2 men and a rented backhoe and ended with 40 employees and contracts across 3 states. When I sold Dearborn Construction and Excavating 8 years ago, I walked away with $2.1 million. I invested the bulk of it conservatively, paid off a couple of things I'd been carrying too long, and let the rest work quietly. I still live in the same house I bought in 1987. I still drive the same pickup truck I bought used in 2009, the one with the dent in the rear passenger door I've never gotten fixed. I eat lunch at the diner on Route 9 most Tuesdays. I do not look like a man with money, and I have spent considerable effort making sure I don't. My father grew up in rural Tennessee during the Depression. He watched his own father lose a farm to a bank that changed its terms without apology. From the time I was old enough to understand it, my father had one financial philosophy. Keep your cards close, be generous when it matters, and never let anyone know the full count. I am my father's son. When I transferred $87,000 to a wedding venue, I did it the way he would have. Through my attorney's office, under a holding company name that meant nothing to anyone who didn't have reason to look. The contract listed my name as primary account holder, buried where only venue staff would find it. My instructions were simple. The name stays quiet unless there is a dispute. Otherwise, it happened, and I don't need the credit. Here is who they thought I was. A 63-year-old retired tradesman with a modest pension and a bad hip, living in the same neighborhood where he'd always lived, driving a truck that needed a wash. Widower. Quiet. The kind of man you seat at the edge of things. My son is a good man, 34 years old, structural engineer, steady and decent in a way that I can't take credit for. He got it from his mother, mostly, along with her patience and her habit of listening to people before he speaks. He met his fiancée 3 years ago at a work conference in Charlotte. She is from a family with a different relationship to money than ours. Her father is a commercial real estate developer, a man who puts money on top of other money and takes a percentage, who wears a blazer to casual dinners and talks about his portfolio like it's a second identity. Her mother collects things. Memberships, opinions, the names of restaurants that are difficult to get into. The first time I had dinner at their house, I was introduced to a table full of their friends as Wielder's dad. Not by name, not by profession, just that. The conversation had very little to do with me. I ate a very good meal and drove home in my pickup, and I thought, all right, I see what we're working with. My son saw none of that. He saw his fiancée, who loves him genuinely, and her family, who seemed, when they were at their best, to be making an effort. When you're in love, you extend that kind of credit. I did it once too. It's not a criticism. 6 months before the wedding, he called me on a Sunday afternoon. His voice had that quality it gets when he's worked out what he wants to say, but isn't entirely at peace with it. He told me his fiancée's parents had their hearts set on the Riverside Pavilion for the reception. A converted farmhouse property north of the city. Beautiful grounds. Very popular. Very expensive. He told me they were having some timing issues with a real estate deal that hadn't closed when it was supposed to, and the venue deposit was more than they could comfortably swing right now. He wasn't asking me for anything. He was just telling me. I told him I heard him, and I'd think on it. The following Tuesday, I called my attorney and told him what I wanted to do. He set it up. The payment went through the holding company. The venue got their money and their signed contract. I told my attorney, the name stays quiet unless there is a dispute. If anyone ever tries to tell that venue a service isn't owed, you pull the records. Otherwise, it happened. 4 months went by. My son called to say the venue situation was sorted out, that her parents had worked something out. I said that was good news. And I meant it. I had not done it to hold it over anyone. I did it because he is my son, and his happiness matters to me in a way that is not complicated or conditional. 14 days before the wedding, he called again. I could tell before he said anything. The half-second pause, the careful breathing. He told me his future in-laws had been working on the seating layout for the reception, and the head table was going to be him and his new bride and her parents and 4 of their closest friends, and it was getting tight. He said they'd thought it might be more comfortable. He used that word, for me to sit at the family table across the room. He said I'd have a better view of the dance floor from there. I let him finish. Then I asked who else would be at that table. He said his fiancée's elderly aunt, a cousin and her +1, 2 friends of the family coming from out of town who didn't know many people. I told him I understood. I told him not to worry about it. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time. Here is the thing about being 63. Humiliation doesn't land the same way it did at 33. At 33, it's a punch. At 63, it comes in slow, like pressure building behind a wall, until you understand the full weight and shape of it. By the time I'd sat with it for an hour, I wasn't hurt so much as clear. I knew what the arrangement was communicating. They wanted me at the edge of the picture. Not removed, that would raise questions, but minimized, tastefully out of the way. I had nearly made my peace with it. What you do for your children, you do without strings. That is just the job. Then my cousin called. She'd been invited through her husband, who had worked with my son on a project a couple of years back. She is a woman who pays attention and takes what she hears seriously. She had been at a birthday dinner the previous week with some of her husband's colleagues, a couple of whom moved in the same circles as my son's in-laws. At that dinner, his future mother-in-law had said something. My cousin didn't want to tell me. I could hear it in how she started the sentence 3 different times. Finally, she said, they'd told people I had memory problems, that I was struggling, that my son was managing things for me, my affairs, my calendar, checking in on me, that they'd had to make certain accommodations at the wedding because of my situation. The exact phrase she repeated was, he's not the man he used to be, bless his heart. But Wilder handles it so graciously. I thanked her. I said I was fine. I told her to enjoy the wedding. Then I sat back down in my kitchen chair, the one with the slightly uneven leg that I have been meaning to fix for 6 years, and looked out the window at the elm tree in the backyard. They had excluded me from the head table to make their family portrait look the way they wanted it to look, and then they had needed a story to explain that exclusion. And the story they chose was, the father has lost a step. The father is not quite right. The father needs to be managed. Not only was it untrue, it was the one thing specifically calculated to undo me. My reputation for clear thinking and sound judgment is the currency I built 30 years of work on. My crew trusted my decisions. My clients trusted my word. My attorney has told me more than once that he wishes all his clients thought as precisely as I do. And these people had told a dinner party that I was fading. I was not fading. I was, if anything, thinking more clearly than I had all year. I went and looked at my good suit. Riverside Pavilion is 40 minutes north. I arrived about 30 minutes into the reception, after the ceremony had finished and the cocktail hour was settling into the dinner transition. I parked at the far end of the lot and walked in through the main entrance. The grounds were everything the photographs suggested. White tent, string lights, strung between trees, the last of the October light coming in long and amber through the tree line. A jazz trio was playing something I recognized but couldn't name. Servers moved through the crowd in crisp black uniforms. I found the family table without any trouble. My son's fiancée's elderly aunt was already seated, a small woman in her 80s with a sharp face and a glass of white wine she was working through at a considered pace. She looked me over when I sat down and said, without preamble, "You're the engineer's father. You look like a man who has all his faculties." I told her thank you. "Don't thank me," she said. "It's an observation. I've known this family for 60 years. They have a habit of deciding what the story is before the facts are in." I liked her immediately. My son found me within 10 minutes. He came through the crowd with that open face of his, the one that looks exactly like his mother's did, and he hugged me hard and held on a moment longer than he usually does. He was happy, genuinely, fully happy, the way you only manage to be on a handful of days in your life, and I was glad to be there to see it. We talked about the ceremony, about how beautiful his wife had looked. I did not mention why I had come or what I intended to do if it came to that. Some conversations keep better on an empty stomach. His in-laws moved through the room on a route that never came within 30 feet of my table. Her father caught my eye once, across the tent. He raised his glass slightly, the way you acknowledge someone you're not sure you need to take seriously. I did not raise mine. About 45 minutes in, I saw the event coordinator. She was in her early 50s, efficient and unhurried, clipboard at her side, navigating the room the way an experienced professional does, with the appearance of ease that only comes from done something hundreds of times. I watched her consult with a bar staff member near the entrance. I watched her check her clipboard, and then I watched her make her way toward the host area, where my son's father-in-law was standing with a cluster of guests, drink in hand, performing at full volume. She spoke to him quietly. I couldn't hear it from the family table, but I could read the body language well enough. He shook his head. She said something else. His expression shifted, the confident host face becoming something more careful. He made a gesture toward the far side of the tent, and I understood he was trying to direct her towards someone who could handle it for him. She nodded, then she walked straight across the room to me. She said my name, my full name clearly without hesitation, and apologized for interrupting my evening. She said she had a contract question requiring the primary account holder's authorization. Behind her, I could see my son's father-in-law tracking the exchange from where he stood. She explained, a bar service upgrade had been requested. A premium bourbon addition to the open bar for the remainder of the evening, approximately $2,200. Per the venue's contract terms, any add-on over $1,500 required direct authorization from the primary account holder. I asked her if the name on the contract was mine. She checked her clipboard. It was. By the time she confirmed it, my son's father-in-law had covered the distance across the tent and was standing at the edge of the family table. He still had his drink. He was composed in the way that men like him are always composed in public, a skill that gets practiced into instinct. He said there was clearly some administrative confusion. He said he didn't understand why his name wasn't on the contract. He said it with the pleasant, reasonable affect of a man's, explaining something obvious to someone who needs extra time. The coordinator said she understood there might be multiple parties involved in the planning, but per their records, the contract had been paid in full by an account in my name, and their policy required primary holder authorization for modifications. He turned to me. His eyes carried the particular expression I had seen before, the one where a man tries to look patient with someone he has already dismissed. I'm sure there's been some confusion, he said. Sometimes when people get older, the paperwork can get. The wire confirmation is on my phone, I said. Would you like to see it? He stopped. $87,000, I said. Transferred on October 14th. I have the confirmation number and the account it came from if that would be useful. The guests at the two nearest tables had gone quiet. The aunt with the white wine was watching with undisguised interest. My son was there now. I had heard him come up behind me, that particular way he moves when he's trying not to rush. He was very still, the way he goes still when he's processing something that hasn't finished arriving yet. I took out my phone, I pulled up the wire confirmation, I handed it to him. He looked at it for a long time. He looked at the date. He looked at the amount. He looked at the holding company name, which my attorney could trace back to me in under a minute for anyone who needed it verified. His face was doing something complicated and quiet, the way faces do when a floor gives way slowly rather than all at once. His father-in-law said, "There's an explanation for this." "There is," I said. "Your family had a cash flow problem with the venue deposit. I paid it, anonymously, because I didn't want anyone to feel obligated to me. I asked my attorney to keep it quiet unless there was ever a dispute about services." I let a beat pass. There appears to be a dispute. The coordinator stood with her clipboard and said nothing. She was a professional. She waited. I looked at her. "The bourbon upgrade? No, I'm not authorizing it." She made a note. "What's the outstanding balance on the catering service?" She checked. $48,000, billed at close of event per standard contract terms. If I withdraw as host of record, I said, where does that balance fall? She looked at the clipboard. The listed event contact was my son's father-in-law. She said so, simply, without theater. $48,000 settling onto a man who has just finished telling a room full of people that I have memory difficulties is not a sound you actually hear, but you feel it. His wife appeared at his elbow. She said something to him very low. He was looking at the floor. I stood up, I put on my jacket, I looked at my son. There were tears on his face, which I had not expected, and which cost me more than anything else that evening. He does not cry easily. He gets that from me. I didn't know, he said. I know you didn't, I said. You would have talked me out of it. Why didn't you tell me what they were saying about you? Because you were happy, I said. Your being happy matters more to me than my being right. I looked at his wife. She was standing just behind him, very still, very pale. Whatever she had known or not known, she was not the one who had told a dinner party her future father-in-law was losing his mind. That conversation could wait for a day when we were both ready to have it. Congratulations, I told her. I mean that. I turned and walked out through the main entrance, past the jazz trio, who had started playing again, past the servers with their trays, out into the cool dark of the parking lot. The gravel was loud under my dress shoes. My truck was at the far end, parked next to a catering van. I got in, started the engine, and let it warm up for a moment. I thought about my father. About what he would make of $87,000 spent on an October evening for a couple whose in-laws had described him, at a dinner party, as someone his son was managing. He would have laughed first, I think. That short, dry laugh he had, that meant he had seen this particular kind of foolishness before and wasn't impressed by it. Then, he would have told me to go home and eat something. I stopped at the diner on Route 9. My usual booth was open. The woman who has worked the Tuesday and Saturday evening shift there since before my wife passed brought me coffee without being asked and took my order for a turkey club. It came out in 10 minutes, and I ate it without rushing. The check was $17 and some change. I left $30 on the table. By the time I drove home, 3 texts had come through from my son. I read them in the driveway in the dark with the engine off. He wasn't angry. He was confused and sorry, and he asked me to call when I could. I sent back 4 words, I know, call tomorrow, and went inside. I poured a cup of coffee from the machine I've had since 2011. Sat in the chair by the window that looks out onto the backyard. The same elm tree I planted the year Wilder was born was losing its leaves now, going bare in the way of things that are solid enough not to worry about it. A week later, when enough time had passed for the facts to settle and the feelings to come down to a manageable temperature, my son came over for dinner. We made chili the way I've always made it, with the recipe that came from my mother-in-law, and we ate at the kitchen table with the game on low in the other room. He told me his in-laws had covered the venue balance using a line of credit they hadn't planned to touch. He said they had not had a great deal to say to him or his wife in the days that followed. He said his wife had cried when he told her what her mother had said about me at that dinner party. She had not known. She had asked if she could come and talk to me, and I told him to tell her yes. Whenever she was ready, the door was open. He asked me why I had never told him about the money. I told him what I have always believed. You keep your cards close. You are generous when it matters. You don't wave it around. He sat with that for a while. Then he said, you could have just let it go. At the reception, you could have gone home. I refilled my coffee. I thought about my father. About the farm his father lost to a bank that changed its terms. About what it means to let a lie stand when the lie is about who you are. I could have, I said. But they told a room full of people that I wasn't right in the head. I spent 30 years building something. I'm 63 years old with all my faculties, and I am not going out like that. He nodded. He understood. We washed the dishes together after, like we always have since he was tall enough to reach the sink, and he drove home. I stood at the window for a few minutes after his headlights disappeared down the street. The elm trees stood in the dark, large and unhurried, the way things get when they've been around long enough. I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed.